morning. I'm going to be very brief because I recognize that we're short on time. There's a lot to talk about in terms of this topic, and I can talk very fast, so if I'm going too fast, just wait. This topic can be vast in terms of... So I'm going to address two key topics that are basically the pillar of trust. Michael earlier talked about trust in digital space, and unfortunately I didn't know that he was going to talk about identity, because if I know, I could make my topic much more related, because I just happen to be the person who designed Thai National Digital ID project right now. Any of you could ask me a question about that later. So I'm going to talk about two topics, cybersecurity and data privacy. That's because it's a hot topic everywhere in the world, and especially Thailand, because we just very recently, when I say recently, I mean like 20 days ago, we just had these two laws on the book, right? Cybersecurity Act and Data Privacy Act. And I participated in the entire process of drafting this law up to the very end, pushing it with the belief that these two laws play pillar role in the trust in digital economy and digital transformation in Thailand. The law at the end of the day didn't look exactly like what I hoped it would be, but cybersecurity, these are statistics today. 90% of attacks, 90+% of attacks these days begin with a phishing email. How many of you in this room have either been victim of one or know someone who's victim of one? I personally get phone call at least once every other week of friends who get hit by phishing email that leads to some other disaster. In fact, I almost wanted to create a flow chart and just post it online. It says, if this happened to you, these are the things you have to do. Because I literally have to repeat it to my client and my friends all the time. Right? And then cost of online crime is rising every year. That's normal. The third statistic is it takes organization half a year to detect that breach happens on average. And when we say on average, that means some people are doing really well and some people are doing really poor. Imagine if this means that some bad guys are basically walking around inside your network for half a year before you realize they're in there. Right? This is global statistics. ASEAN perform worse than global statistics. We don't have specific survey in ASEAN because it's done not as frequently as global, but that statistic is 2017 global. Half a year. That is actually getting worse over time. As more and more business invest, we expect it to get better, as it will move from 6 months to 5 months to 4 months. But it turns out 3 years ago that statistics was 165 days, and in 3 years it moved to 180 days. More investment doesn't solve this problem for some reason. And it turns out that 43% of cyber attacks these days are aimed at small business, which is another scary statistics, because most small business think we're small fry, nobody's going to hack us, right? They're all going for the banks. Actually, that's not true. Small business. So any of you who have clients that are small businesses, this is something that they're going to run into as they employ more digital transformation. And the last statistic is very interesting. IoT attack went up 600% in 2017. Statistic for 2018 isn't out yet. It's up 600%, which means IoT devices are at risk more than ever. Now, if you look at the data privacy side of things, since 2005, which is basically the biggest breach that we've had, 9,000 breach since, it hasn't been 9,000 days since. Right? So that's the point of that statistics. 81% of consumers says they're worried about their data, rightly so, and 87% thinks companies with data should be regulated. That is a staggeringly high statistic, which means people are really worried about what digital business and big tech, but not just big tech, banks and everyone else is doing with their data. So this is the evolution of threat, right? It began with just hacking and then just traditional cybercrime, people hacking each other. And we start to see in the past decade prevalence in terms of cyber espionage, basically a more extensive campaign to strategically disrupt things that happen in the economy or in terms of national security. And we're moving into the age of cyber terrorists and cyber warfare. This is why statistics are getting worse and worse and worse. So equipping themselves, in reality, from academic point of view, future looks really bleak for small business. I hate to be a bearer of bad news, but that's what I do most of the time. And to combat that, most countries work passing these two laws. Thailand is one of the last in the world. We're a little bit behind everyone else. With these two laws, we're catching up very quickly. And I wish I can tell you more in detail about these two laws, but given the time that we have, it's impossible because it typically takes me 3 hours for each law. And I only have about 5 minutes left. There are lots of details, but the goal of these laws, really, the goal of Cybersecurity Act is to define what businesses and organizations are considered important in Thailand in terms of information infrastructure and what are their responsibilities. So in this room, very many people are considered CAI, but for sure David and his DTAC is definitely CAI. He'll find out in like 100 days. And I can tell him right now that DTAC will definitely be one of the CII, which means there will be responsibility, right? And there will be jail sentence if they don't do things the right way. I hate to be the bringer of bad news, but that's what I do all the time. It set out to set up government strategy and policy and agency and national cybersecurity response framework for when disasters strike. When someone hacked into our favorite telecom network, similar to what happened to Singapore last year, and causes it to go down half a day. If that happens in Thailand, government with this law will have the power to intervene, to command business to participate and respond to government demand to fix things. That's the point of that law. That law is somewhat controversial because there are power in there that is quite broad. So we'll have to figure out how to prevent abuse of power in there. For the second law, Personal Data Protection Act, for some reason it turns out it is basically GDPR. Anyone read the Thai Personal Data Protection Act? Unfortunately, we don't have an English translation, but if you ask Thai friend to read it for you, and then you just hand him a copy of GDPR and says, is this a valid copy, a valid translation of Thai PDPA? Your friend will say it's 95% valid. Right? It is 95% GDPR translation. In fact, some section of it is direct translation from GDPR. So for those businesses that are familiar with GDPR, you'll find home here very quickly. I also hate to be bringer of bad news, but unlike GDPR, which give European business 2 years, and unlike California Data Protection Act, which give businesses 2 years. Thai PDPA actually wanted to give Thai people 180 days, and I fought tooth and nail to give us 1 year, and that's all we got. And when I say 1 year, we're at 11.3 months left, and I'm literally counting down. I'm an advisor to 4 private companies, and I'm fighting very hard to make sure 4 of them stay compliant from day 1, May 27th next year. Okay. Good luck, everyone. This law set out to give Thai people rights in terms of their data and give businesses that control data responsibility. I also hate to be bringer of bad news, but there's one more bad news. Thai PDPA law is, as far as I know, and I looked at many countries' law, but as far as I know, it is the only data protection act in the world with jail sentence built into it. Meaning if you don't do it right, it's 1 year in jail. So once again, this is serious business in Thailand. I think what I told you so far is enough bad news that get more people worried than excited, right? So I always like to bring some good news. Fortunately, given that the regulation and the worry of the consumer is on the bad news side, there are good news, right? There are advances in technology that are going to help solve some of these problems. So AI, we already have David talked about AI just earlier. AI is also very heavily used in cybersecurity and data privacy industry, not just to violate privacy, but also to protect privacy. AI is used in cybersecurity all the time to detect breach, to assist in response process, to predict breach, and there are lots of vendors company, also a lot from US, but from other countries as well, that are leading in that area. Another technology that Dr. Gandhi would talk about momentarily, so I won't mention too much, is blockchain. Blockchain is set to help solve a lot of problems in both cybersecurity and data privacy. In fact, Thai National Digital ID uses blockchain a little bit to ensure that consent are handled correctly to protect privacy. but it also can be used to protect all sorts of data infrastructure. Unfortunately, blockchain is a bit hard to understand, so 2 minutes won't do justice. So please wait for Dr. Kandi. But the other two technology, biometrics is on the rise, and biometrics is really an application of AI, but a very specific application of AI. And my prediction is that biometric will serve us well for a couple of years, fail us horribly for the next couple of years after that, and then people who do very strong biometric and AI will realize what Michael said earlier, that biometrics and identity shouldn't really be static biometric. I've been a long proponent of what we call continuous biometric authentication, which means that we need to identify individual not just with their face and fingers, but continuously through their behaviors and activities. And I don't know anyone who's working on that actively commercially, but I think in 10 years span, in 10 years time, unless companies that work on AI and biometrics adapt to that vision, I think they're all going to die off. There's a good reason, because from cybersecurity perspective, biometric is no more secure than password. In fact, it's weaker than password. From cybersecurity modeling perspective, it is harder to hack than password right now, only because bad guys haven't got used to this technology. But once they've built enough skill and repertoire, their ability to hack it will be even faster and easier than hacking password. So biometric company needs to move away from static authentication to a more dynamic and continuous authentication very promptly. And lastly, the key technology that makes the other two, that makes blockchain work, and that's going to help solve data privacy in all sorts of ways, cryptography. We're sort of in the golden age of cryptography right now. Cryptography is just like AI. It's a technology that's been around for 50-some years, but unlike AI, where it's been in a movie for 50-some years too, so you've been hearing about it, cryptography has been around for 50-some years, and it's responsible for all sorts of secure activity, but it's going to be even more so. And there are lots that are taking very obscure cryptographic knowledge and making it real. And it can do all sorts of wonderful things. So I recommend people looking at that technology future. Here's the last slide. I want to make sure to impart understanding that cybersecurity and trust in the digital world is not responsible of the government only, and it's not all responsible of consumers, and it's not all responsible of just business, and it's not just technology company. It needs all four segments to work together, right? If one of these three actors refuse to participate in building trust ecosystem, then you won't have it, right? Everyone is responsible. Unfortunately, in my venture, in my work, I deal with all four sides, and I get feeling all the time that everyone think that it's someone else's problem, or everyone think that it's someone, other people shouldn't mess with them. For example, government will say, well, we need a lot of power, otherwise we can't control this. Or business will say, well, government shouldn't touch us at all, right? And in reality, both needs to happen, right? Government needs to have some regulation, but businesses need to also have freedom and ability to innovate. And to do that, we need to find ways to build accountability and responsibility into how business deal with consumer data and consumer cybersecurity. I think many of our laws go a little bit too far to force government, to force private sector to be responsible. Unfortunately, that's because in Thailand there's deep distrust between all four segments. Government don't trust business, don't trust consumer, and don't trust technology company, and the other people don't trust each other at the same time. So I hope that, via participation of all four sides, conversation can happen and make cybersecurity a much more cooperative venture in the future. But unless we can get all four parties to be responsible, I don't think we will have a secure future. Government control will not make us, in fact, it can potentially make us less secure if the control is too stringent, because more innovation can actually make us more secure. So that's what I wanted to end with. Thank you.